Good morning, all of you. In this live session, we are going to discuss the most of the concepts related with HIV and AIDS. As a part of World AIDS Day and the comparative analysis between the AIDS and HIV and what is meant by HIV infection and what is the difference between the terms of HIV and AIDS and why it has become such a problematic viral disease since 1983. Okay. So this is Lakshmiya. One second. So one of the problematic virus to the mankind which is challenging the human beings since 1983. In 1983, the HIV virus was first observed in USA, and since then it has faced so many challenges to control the proliferation of this virus. So December 1st being the World AIDS Day, and we can say HIV. Human immunodeficiency virus. The biggest problem about this human immunodeficiency viruses is these viruses can directly attack the immune system. These viruses will directly attack the immune system. As the viruses are directly attacking the immune system, okay, so it has become the problem to control these viruses. And the second concept about these viruses is human immunodeficiency virus, the virus which is a viral RNA. Any virus whose genetic information is in the with reference to the if any virus which is having the genetic information in the form of RNA as its genetic information, so it is going to face so much complications to control the proliferation of the virus. For example, if you look at the concept of about the coronavirus, why human knowledge is unable to control the proliferation of this coronavirus is because it's viral RNA. So any virus which is having its genetic information in the form of RNA is having such a complexity to control the virus. So in this session, we are going to discuss what is HIV and what is HIV virus and how this virus, the mode of transmissions of this virus, and there we are going to discuss about the differences between the vertical transmission and horizontal transmission, and then we will be discussing about the symptoms of the viral infection. So what are the major symptoms that can be seen to the individuals? After that, we are going to discuss one more important concept about the diagnostic tests, which are very, very important for your examination point of view as well as for your understanding purpose. So what are the major diagnostic tests? After that, we will be discussing about the most important concept called as HIV and AIDS Regulation Act that has been formulated by the Union government to control the proliferation of this HIV virus. And the HIV and AIDS Regulation Act is one of the powerful tools to provide livelihood to these particular infected individuals. So in this session, first one is HIV and AIDS. So as the title of this particular session, we are focusing on the concept called as what is meant by HIV and AIDS. Human immunodeficiency virus, when it enters into the human system, will attack the whenever it enters into the human system, it will try to combat the immune system. And before the onset of the symptoms, we will call it as just a HIV infection. Once once the symptoms have been started into those individuals, we will call this as acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So, what is meant by syndrome? Syndrome is nothing but a group of diseases. So, if the several symptoms have been prevalent in those individuals, we can call this as the syndrome. So, just try to understand. If more than one symptom is there among the individuals, and if the virus can cause several symptoms, then we can call it as syndrome. So it is not a just disease. So HIV virus will cause a disease called as acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Syndrome stands for any virus which can able to this disease is going to cause multiple parameters and multiple organ failure can be caused through this. And the second important unique feature about this virus is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And so before the onset of the symptoms, we can call it as the HIV infection. So it means if we are taking the viral load is increasing in the individual. As the viral load is increasing, just try to understand. As the viral load is increasing in the individual, and after the HIV infection only, we can see the beginning of the symptoms. As the symptoms have been started, we can call this particular infection as AIDS. So that is the literal definition between the difference between the HIV infection and AIDS. HIV infection is the condition where the symptoms will be. HIV infection is the condition where symptoms have not been started. Where we can call it as incubation period. The proliferation of the virus can be seen. As the virus has been proliferated to an endless condition, the virus will become such a virus will develop itself through a concept called as window period. And as the virus has been developed through the window period, we can see that individual has become the virus has been proliferated. After certain point of time, the virus will start damaging the organs. Once the virus started damaging the organs, we can call it as the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Next, so that is the major difference between HIV and AIDS. Coming to the mode of transmission of this. Mode of transmission. So the most important transmission, according to the World Health Organization, formulated the mode of transmission can be seen through the two dimensions. One is vertical transmission. Number two is horizontal transmission. Vertical transmission and horizontal transmissions are the two important modes of transmission, particularly seen in HIV infection. What is meant by vertical transmission? The transmission that can be seen from mother to fetus can be called as vertical transmission. So this is a very important concept you need to understand with reference to the segment. So the mode of transmission that can be seen from the mother to fetus can be called as vertical transmission. And whereas in the case of horizontal transmission is nothing but the transmission of the pathogen from one individual to the next other individual, either through the blood or saliva, sweat, urine, blood. So this transmission or through the direct contact is called as horizontal transmission. So what are this? I hope you understand the concept difference between the vertical transmission and horizontal transmission. Vertical transmission is the transmission where the transmission of the virus or the pathogen from mother to the fetus through the amniotic fluid or through the during the labor pains or during the delivery or through the breastfeeding can be called as vertical transmission. So the best example for the vertical transmission is nothing but the leprosy. Leprosy is the disease that can have more chances for the transmission of the Mycobacterium leprae can transmit from the mother to the fetus through these four parameters. So the transmission of the virus from the mother to fetus can be seen through the vertical transmission through these particular segments. Number two is nothing but the horizontal transmission. What is meant by horizontal transmission is nothing but horizontal transmission is the transmission which is happening through the sexual intercourses, or the transmission which is happening through the direct contact, or if the transmission is happening through the transfusion of the blood, or if the transmission is happening through the direct contact, we can call it as horizontal transmission. HIV virus, or the transmission of HIV virus can be seen both through the vertical as well as horizontal transmission. So that is the concept. So the biggest problem of the HIV virus infection is with reference to the vertical transmission and not with reference to the horizontal transmission. And if you need to understand why HIV virus is having such a greatest potential and greatest threat to the vertical transmission, just try to understand. Vertical transmission of the virus has become such a problematic thing because the diagnostic test which has been focused on the vertical transmission, the diagnostic test which has been focused on the vertical transmission. Good morning, Lakshmi. So the vertical transmission, just try to understand the concept, is a very powerful technique. In the vertical transmission only, the diagnostic tests that are focusing on the individuals. Okay, so for example, there are various diagnostic tests. Related diagnostic test. Number 2 is enzyme diagnostic test. For example, if you are observing the antibody related diagnostic test, if you are monitoring the antibody related diagnostic test. So if you are observing you're welcome, Lakshmi. So particularly in the case of just try to understand this one. For example, why this particular transmission, why the mortality rate is extremely high among the children, particularly with reference to the viral load, is unable to control, particularly for the children. Number 1, the virus which is entering through the vertical transmission will have a window period which can be equated with the incubation period. So after the incubation period, viral load will be developed. As the viral load is developing, just try to understand, as the viral load is developing, after one point of time, there will be no strong enough potential for these individuals to fight against that particular to produce the antibodies. So if the HIV virus is entering, so the immune system will respond to that particular virus, and this immune system will start producing the antibodies. But in kids or in children, so they are unable to produce the antibodies because the virus is directly attacking to the immune system. That is point number 1. And number 2, the children are unable to produce the stronger amount of antibodies in response to this particular antigen. So that is why extreme levels of the mortality can be seen to these individuals. So the mortality is extremely high in this HIV infection, particularly in the vertical transmission, because the infection among the children cannot able to strongly produce the antibodies. And whatever the antibodies that are produced in the children may not able to fight against the particular individuals. Okay, so that is the concept with reference to the vertical transmission and horizontal transmission. I hope you understand the difference between the vertical transmission and horizontal transmission. Okay, next. So WHO has also pointed out mentioned the key population for the HIV infection. What is meant by key population? These are the people who are the best carriers of this particular pathogen. So these are the actually particular we can compare with reference to the super spreaders. So super spreaders are the individuals who are exactly super spreaders who can able to spread the viral infection to thousands of the people can be called as super spreaders. Particularly, these key populations can also be equated with reference to the super spreaders. Who are the key populations? If we can able to control these particular individuals, the entire viral load and the entire viral transmission can be curtailed down. Number 1, so the people who are included with the number 1, the people who are the transgenders are the most transgenders are the major important population, major important key population, particularly with reference to the HIV transmission. And number two is people who constantly depend upon the drugs, people who inject drugs, people who inject drugs, and people in prison, people in prisons, people in prisons. So people in prisons can also be more affected by this. Can also be considered as key populations. Sex workers and their clients. Sex workers and their clients. Sex workers and their clients can also be considered as a part of this key population. So these are the four important key populations which can be dealt under the which has been mentioned by the WHO. Okay. So number one, transgenders. Number two, people who have injected drugs, people in prisons, and sex workers and their clients can be considered as the key populations. So if we can focus, if we want to, National AIDS Control Organization or SACO, State AIDS Control Organization, if they want to curtail the proliferation of this HIV virus, they have to focus on this particular segment, people who are popularly considered as the key population. So that is the one important concept about this particular HIV infection. Next, why HIV virus and AIDS has become such a problematic thing, even for with such an advanced technology. So for almost for around 40 years, the scientific community is struggling a lot to identify a vaccine or invent a thing for HIV virus, because HIV virus is having a challenging enzyme called as reverse transcriptase. Reverse transcriptase. The problematic enzyme or the troublesome enzyme that can be seen in the HIV virus is called as reverse transcriptase. What is the problem with the reverse transcriptase is nothing but so what is the transcription? What is reverse transcription? Transcription is nothing but converting the DNA into RNA. Converting DNA into RNA can be called as transcription. So what is the meaning of DNA to RNA is nothing but, so in the human genome, the DNA, from the DNA, the copies of the DNA or the copied information from the DNA will be converted into RNA, which is called as mRNA or messenger RNA. mRNA or messenger RNA. Through this mRNA or messenger RNA, this copied genetic information can extremely convert it into DNA, from DNA to RNA. So the process of converting DNA into RNA is called as transcription. The process of converting DNA into RNA is called as transcription. What is meant by reverse transcription? Reverse transcription, so you can guess it very simple. So reverse transcription is nothing but, so conversion of DNA into RNA is transcription. So obviously we can say conversion of RNA into DNA can be called as reverse transcription. What is exactly meant by conversion of so if the conversion of DNA into RNA is transcription, and if the conversion of RNA into DNA is called as reverse transcription. So RNA into DNA. Why the RNA is converting into DNA? That is a very important. So in the HIV, for example, HIV virus or coronavirus, this the mechanism is same. Once the virus enters into the human system, it will try to attack or it will try to take over the protein synthesis machinery of the host cell. So, for example, this is the host cell. In this host cell, this is the nucleus, and this is a virus. So, it may be a HIV virus or it may be coronavirus. So, this virus will try to intervene with the genetic information or the protein synthesis machinery of the host. So this virus, as it is trying to, so HIV virus, as it is trying to attack, as it is trying to take over the genetic information or protein synthesis machinery of the host, what will happen? So the host is having its genetic information in the form of what? DNA. So this viral virus is having its genetic information in the form of what? RNA. Virus is having its genetic information in the form of RNA, whereas in the case of host is having its genetic information in the form of DNA. Now, to attach to the viral DNA or to take over or to grab the genetic, to take the protein synthesis machinery in the virus, so what should be done? This RNA, are you getting my point now? This RNA should be converted into DNA with the help of an enzyme called as reverse transcriptase. So reverse transcriptase is reverse to the transcription mechanism. What is meant by transcription? Transcription is nothing but the conversion of DNA into RNA is the transcription. And if that RNA is trying to convert into the DNA, we can call it as reverse transcription. So the enzyme that is responsible for the reverse transcription is called as reverse transcriptase. That is a fantastic feature about this reverse transcriptase. So reverse transcriptase is the process where RNA will be converted into DNA to take the protein synthesis machinery of the host. So if the virus is trying to take the protein synthesis machinery of the host, what will happen to this virus? Virus will intervene into this host DNA, and it will try to control the protein synthesis machinery of the host, and it will never allow the other organisms. So that is, host will not do the things independently. Host genetic information will happen as per its own requirements. They will happen as per. So the host genetic information will be regulated by the virus. That is the thing. So the enzyme is called as reverse transcriptase. The mechanism in the mechanism of the reverse transcriptase is nothing but a conversion of RNA into DNA. And so as the reverse transcriptase is the enzyme which is responsible for the conversion of RNA into DNA, and this is the problematic enzyme. So because of the presence of this reverse transcriptase enzyme. So for example, if you can able to block this reverse transcriptase. So reverse transcriptase is the enzyme. Enzymes are made up of proteins. If you can able to block the proteins, the entire protein synthesis machinery will be blocked and we can protect. But because of the presence of the reverse transcriptase enzyme, the virus cannot be controlled. The virus cannot be controlled on a systematic manner. The virus cannot be controlled by the systematic manner. That is the very, very important. So if you develop a vaccine and if you are trying to apply that vaccine, okay, drug, that virus, by the time of the applying the drug, the virus may transform into the new form. So the virus will constantly changes its genetic information from one form to the another form because of the presence of this particular enzyme called as reverse transcriptase enzyme. I hope you understand the concept about the reverse transcriptase machinery. And then we can see, as we discussed, the most important transmission of the HIV virus is vertical transmission. So the World Health Organization has also formulated the concept called as EMTCT. What is EMTCT? Elimination of mother-to-child transmission. So elimination of mother-to-child transmission is the very biggest problem, particularly with reference to the HIV virus, HIV infection. Elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV. Elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV. Okay. So that is the concept about this particular virus. Okay. Coming to the very, very important concept, particularly with reference to the HIV and Indian scenario, the very popular bill called as HIV and AIDS Prevention and Control Bill. HIV and AIDS Prevention and Control Bill 2017. Till it has not been completely converted into Act. So there are three important formulations are there, particularly under this HIV and AIDS prevention and Regulation Bill 2017. So, number one, the bill defines the discrimination. So, so actually, the definition for the discrimination is such a greatest thing. So, if any person has shown discrimination towards HIV patient, either in the name of for renting the house, or for giving the employment, or for residence purpose, or for public or private employment. So those individuals will be punishable completely. That is the first important one. So that discrimination. So on what can be considered as a discrimination? So the bill defines the discrimination. Definition of the discrimination. Definition of discrimination. Definition of the discrimination. So discrimination or as a denial in which the individual will be considered. So if you are any individual is trying to reside in the house or renting the houses, or if any person refuse to get the employment opportunity either in the both public as well as private employment in the name of HIV infection. So all these things will be considered as the violation, and all if anybody violates this discrimination and practices this discrimination will be punishable according to the law. Okay, so that is the first important. So first is discrimination. Definition for the discrimination has been kept particularly through the bill. So through this definition, everyone should be having the proper right to reside. So wherever he want to reside, so he can reside, and employment opportunities and healthcare facilities, and he can rent his houses also. So that is the concept with reference to the definition of the discrimination. Number two, and all HIV. So, for example, if any government, so for example, if a person wants to know the status of the HIV positive person. So, for example, if a person is suffering from HIV infection, if he wants to know the status of the HIV person, he should just try to understand. He should understand. So, for example, A is A is applying for a job in a public or private sector organization, and if we want to get employment in that organization, he should get the so that organization is seeking on the HIV positive the HIV status of this individual. That organization must get prior approval from the court. So without court order, no one is eligible to seek the healthcare system, health condition of that particular individual. So that is the one important concept. So to know the status of HIV patient by the employer. So he needs to get the prior approval from the court. Without getting the prior approval from the court, he is not at all eligible to go for that one. Number three, so even though HIV and AIDS treatment is free, it is not illegal before this bill. So this HIV and AIDS treatment, so the treatment for HIV and AIDS has become legalized through this bill only. So if anybody rejects the treatment, if anybody refuses to treat this HIV positive patient, he will be punishable according to the act, because the treatment for the HIV has become the legal right of every HIV positive patient. If the HIV positive patient can have the legal right to get the access to this one. So that is the one important concept about this. Okay, legal right. The treatment for HIV has become the legal right. Okay. Next. What are the diagnostic tests for the HIV? So what are the major diagnostic tests? Number one is RT-PCR. The diagnostic tests are RT-PCR, reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. So we have already discussed the enzyme that is the problematic enzyme for the HIV infection is nothing but the reverse transcription. So we'll discuss while discussing the treatment. So RT-PCR is one of the important mechanism. RT-PCR, one of the major diagnostic tests to control the transmission of the pathogen. Number 2 is nothing but ELISA. Enzyme linked immunosorbent assay. Enzyme linked immunosorbent assay is one of the most problematic. It is one of the most accurate diagnostic tests because enzymes. So which enzyme here also we can see the reverse transcriptase enzyme will be identified. Number 3 is nothing but we can see one more diagnostic test is nothing but TRIDOR. Number 4 is nothing but Western blotting. Western blotting. So why this HIV infection has become such a problematic infection among these individuals and how this HIV infection can be controlled on a larger scale. Let us have a discussion about this. Listen. HIV infection. How to control this HIV infection? Number 1, why the problem is extremely increasing, but to control the HIV or human immunodeficiency virus. Number 1, just try to understand. HIV virus is a tricky virus because of its the genetic information of the virus is RNA information. So because of the presence of the genetic information in the form of RNA, it has become so much complicated. Take any of the virus that is challenging the humankind is the viral RNA viruses. So the virus which is having its genetic information in the form of RNA is having so much complications to be controlled. Next, so coming to this. What are the major important initiatives that can be seen, or what are the control measures? Why this virus is still challenging the mankind? Because of the presence of an enzyme called as reverse transcriptase. Okay, so these are the diagnostic tests. Next, coming to the treatment. So, what is the major important treatment? So, for example, in the in 1990s, the HIV infection has become the problematic infection because several hundreds of lakhs of people has been really worried about this infection. But what is happening with reference to this virus infection? Let us understand. What is the treatment mechanism? So any virus which is having its genetic information, so which is having the enzyme called as reverse transcriptase can be kept under the class called as retroviridase. Any virus which is having its genetic information in the form of reverse transcriptase can be kept under the class called as retroviridase. So the major target for nevirapine or any medicine which is using for the HIV infection will be targeted to control the reverse transcriptase. If you can able to block the reverse transcriptase enzyme, the entire machinery of the HIV can be controlled. Okay, so for example, retroviridase. So why this organism is called any virus which is having a reverse transcriptase enzyme, any virus which is having reverse transcriptase enzyme can be kept under the retroviridase family. So if we can able to block this reverse transcriptase, so our target is to block this reverse transcriptase. The major important target of ours is nothing but to control the reverse transcriptase. Through this reverse transcriptase, if we can able to control this reverse transcriptase, hence the treatment is called as ART, antiretroviral therapy. Antiretroviral therapy. ART stands for what? ART stands for antiretroviral therapy. ART, antiretroviral. So in which we can able to see the transmission of the virus or the control of the virus can be seen. The control of the virus can be seen through the blockage of the enzyme called as reverse transcriptase enzyme. Okay, so that is the concept with reference to this retroviridae virus or ART. So what is the relevance? What is the close relation between the HIV and TB infection? The mortality in the HIV positive patients can be seen extremely high with reference to the tuberculosis only. The people who have been affected with the tuberculosis will be having more chances. These two things have become more close. As long as these two things are very closely related, then we can see the mortality is extremely high. So in normal conditions, we cannot have that much of mortality. But whereas in the case of the individuals who have already infected with the HIV and TB, then we can have a tremendous problem in this particular mortality. Let us see what is. The people, the TB is that condition. TB is the disease which is not at all a problematic disease to the individuals unless or until it reaches the drug resistance TB or multi-drug resistance TB or any drug resistance. All those things are the problematic things in the TB. Normally, tuberculosis is not at all the problematic thing among the individuals. For example, if you look at the every individual, very often 99% of these Indians will be having the Mycobacterium tuberculosum in the lung, in the colonies of the lungs. But what is happening once the virus is spreading? Just try to understand. Once the virus has become prevalent, once the virus has been increasing, okay, when the bacteria is developing in the colonies. So, as indiscriminate use of the antibiotics will lead to the multi-MDR, XDR, TDR, multi-drug resistance, total drug resistance. So, once try to understand, once the bacteria is gaining resistance, means the immune system is not responding. The immune system is not responding means which the virus which is causing the destruction to the immune system is nothing but HIV. That is why these two are such a close coordinated viruses. What are the two infections? HIV and tuberculosis. The mortality rate is more than 95% if the person is suffering from the TB as well as HIV. For example, if you look at the countries, so either it may be the westernized countries or the African countries. So the mortality rate is extremely high because wherever the TB is there the infection to this particular HIV or the mortality rate to the HIV is also extremely high. So this is the concept about this particular TB and HIV close prevalence. So TB is not at all a problematic disease. When the TB will be problematic, whenever the individuals are using the indiscriminate use of the antibiotics. So, if they are not using the antibiotics properly, then the TB will be turned into the biggest problematic TB called as MDR, multi-drug resistance, XDR, extreme drug resistance, TDR, total drug resistance. As the virus has become such a is gaining such a popularity, then the most problematic thing is they need to control the virus. They need to control this particular bacteria. So the resistance is happening because of the lack of immune system. As they are not having the proper immune system. So it is the point where the HIV is also dominating. Okay. So that is why we can see the infections has become such a problematic thing. Good morning, Srinivas. So that infections has become such a problematic thing to these particular individuals. So that is the biggest thing. So why HIV and TB are closely related? Why HIV mortality rate is extremely high to the individuals who are suffering from the TB is because the infections, the TB is not a problematic infection. But once the TB has been converted into this multi-drug resistance or extreme drug resistance or total drug resistance, then immunity of the individual has become weakened And the virus that whose infection is also related with the immunity is nothing but the HIV. Because of these two close concepts, the mortality rate has become extremely increasing among the individuals. So that is the biggest problematic thing among these individuals who are suffering from the HIV infection. I hope you understand the concept about this particular thing. Okay, so diagnosis, we have already discussed about the diagnosis. And treatment. Treatment is called as ART, antiretroviral therapy. What stands for the ART is nothing but the transmission of the pathogen from to control the reverse transcription. So how to control the reverse transcription is nothing but if we can able to block the reverse transcriptase mechanism. So we have discussed about the reverse transcriptase. What is meant by reverse transcriptase? Transcription and reverse transcription. Just try to understand these two terms. The conversion of DNA into RNA is transcription, and the conversion of RNA into DNA is called as reverse transcription. Conversion of DNA into RNA is transcription, and conversion of RNA into DNA is called as reverse transcription. And while converting the RNA into DNA, so such a fantastic method. So the conversion of RNA into DNA is reverse transcription. In this reverse transcription, the protein synthesis machinery will be handled. So the enzyme responsible for the conversion of RNA into DNA is called as reverse transcriptase. If we can able to cut the reverse transcriptase enzyme, which is a very problematic thing, but if we can able to block this reverse transcriptase enzyme, the entire protein synthesis, the HIV proliferation will be stopped, but the viral load cannot be completely controlled. So virus is nowadays is not at all a biggest infection to the individuals, because ART, antiretroviral therapy with good physical fitness and very good health, you can able to control the transmission of this particular virus. Okay, now mortality rate has been extremely reduced because of this ART. ART has become such a most successful treatment for the HIV infection. Okay, next, what is meant by window period? Window period. So window period is nothing but the period. So just we can compare this window period with the gestation period or incubation period. What is meant by incubation period? The time gap between the infection and exhibition of the symptoms can be called as incubation period. Just let me explain you. For example, if a person has been infected today, okay, after 10 days, so for example, after 14 days of the incubation period, okay, so the time gap between the infection and exhibition of the symptoms can be called as incubation period, general. But whereas in the case of HIV virus does not have a specific incubation period, that is why this is called as window period. Okay, so the problem of the HIV virus is, for example, within that particular, during the window period, if you diagnose the virus also, the individual may show the negative. For example, if you go for the diagnosis, so today if a person has been transfused the blood with the HIV virus, okay, so the virus has entered into the individual. And if you diagnose, so if you do the RT-PCR or if you perform the ELISA or whatever it may be, the diagnostic test you have conducted, but those tests may go negative because the individual is in the window period. Window period is the period where the we can call it as a time gap between the infection and exhibition of the symptoms. So which is not a static mechanism. For example, in COVID it is 14 days. In hepatitis it is 21 days. In Ebola it is 14 days. So there is a static period for the incubation period. But whereas in the case of window period for the HIV infection is no more a static condition. So we cannot have a static condition for the HIV window period. So it depends upon the fitness of the individual. For example, if a person constantly takes very rich protein diet, and if we do physical fitness every day, and that window period the window period may go more than this 6 years or 10 years, 20 years also, the viral infection and the presence of the viral load cannot be identified in those individuals. But the virus will remains in the individual. Are you getting my point? So window period is the period. It is also the time gap between the infection and the exhibition of the symptoms, but it is not a standard phenomena. The standard period cannot be identified in this window period. I hope you understand the concept of, if you want to differentiate between the window period and incubation period, both are the same. But whereas in the case of window period, you can identify the time gap. So you can have a precise time. For example, COVID-19. So the incubation period for the COVID-19 is 14 days. The incubation period for the hepatitis is 21 days. The incubation period for the Ebola is 14 days. But whereas in the case of HIV infection, there is no specific timeline. That is why it is a problematic thing. So if you can monitor for example, once a person has been infected, okay, and if you have the time period of the 14 days, definitely you can able to make the process proper treatment and proper guidelines can be given. But as you are unable to identify the individual with these things, so that will lead to so much biggest complications among these individuals. So that is the concept with reference to this HIV infection. Okay. So in this video, we have shared the most of the information with reference to this HIV infection. If you have any doubts, you can ask me, and we'll conclude this session, and we'll continue in one more another live session. So I'm planning to make one more live session tomorrow at the same time on the topic called as Gaganyaan. We'll be discussing on the topic called as Gaganyaan on tomorrow and the same time. Okay. So any doubts, you can ask me now. Okay. So don't miss the tomorrow's live session from 9 to 10 on the topic called as Gaganyaan. The tomorrow's topic will be Gaganyaan. So every day I will try to make a live. Every day I will try to make one live session on one specific science and technology or biology related topics. Okay. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and through which you will get the updates about this particular segment. Okay. Thank you. We'll continue tomorrow's live session on Gaganyaan from 9 to 10. Okay. Thank you now. Bye. Stay safe, stay home, and stay healthy.